my friends, yes, welcome to another episode of Nintendo Nightcap, of course, bringing you your daily Nintendo news. I hope you're all well. I am excellent, except for the fact, if you've seen the thumbnail, it is true. Nintendo confirmed no new hardware this year, despite what all the leakers and insiders have been saying for the last 256 years. They have been proven wrong once again because Nintendo says no new hardware. They said this at their latest financial briefing. We're going to get into that, plus all the numbers from the briefing because they make for some super interesting reading indeed. Elsewhere, insiders once again claim there's no Nintendo Direct this June either. So it was even more bad news. Lucky for us, we have this year's most anticipated game in Pikmin 4 arriving. Shut your faces, yes it is. But aside from that, we also have Tears of the Kingdom releasing this Friday. Hell yes. And to hype us up even more, Nintendo have released an interview with the developers who go into, the behind the scenes of making the game, all the challenges they went through in bringing it to the Switch. So I'm going to get all the best bits from that interview and relay them to you. But before we get into any of that, let's, as I always say, if you're new here and you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe and that bell, share to your friends, helps the community grow, and then pull up that chair and sit with us as we delve into today's first story. Because yes, Nintendo president Shuntaro Furukawa has he stated there is in fact no new hardware releasing this year. He said this when releasing all of the latest financials. So we're gonna get into the financials first, have a look at the numbers, and then decide ourselves if we A, believe Nintendo, and two, if it's the best course of action for them moving forward. So if we start with the good news first, we can see that the Nintendo Switch has actually now surpassed 125 million units sold. That is now sitting behind the Nintendo DS on 154 million units and the PS2, which I believe is on 155 million units, meaning the Nintendo Switch would have to sell around another 30 million units to become the highest selling console of all time. Could it do it? Is in with a shout for sure. Elsewhere, if we look at some of the numbers come in for some of Nintendo's most popular titles, we can see that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has actually now shifted 53.79 million copies, which is insane. That's actually 11 million copies more than the game in second place, which is Animal Crossing New Horizons, sitting on 42.21. Elsewhere in the list, we can see Breath of the Wild about to hit 30 million, Splatoon 3 surpassing 10 million, and we got some new climbers to the 1 million club. Yes, we do. We've got Xenoblade Chronicles 3 sitting on 1.86 million, Bayonetta 3 sitting on 1.07, Fire Emblem Engage sitting on 1.61, and Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe on 1.46, as well as Metroid Prime Remastered selling 1.09 million copies. In fact, the Switch has now become the first Nintendo system to surpass 1 billion units of software sold. So massive news there, massive numbers. But how does that relate to this year's financial earnings compared to last year? So when we look at the numbers and break them down, actually it starts to paint a bit of a mixed picture because all of the numbers bar one have a downward trajectory. So we can see that net sales are down, operating profit is down 14.9%, gross profit is actually down 6.4%. And we can see that even though the Switch did sell 17.97 million units this financial year, that's actually down 22.1%. In fact, as good as the news was for the software, that's actually also down 9%. The only upwards pattern is in the digital sales, which is up to 3 billion. That's up 12.7%. So a mixed picture there for Nintendo, because whilst lifetime hardware and software sales remain extremely impressive, it's clear to see that the year-to-year decline in numbers, specifically that of the Switch, dropping 22%, seems to be a sign that the Switch is now coming to the end of its life cycle, which is probably predictable seeing as it is now in its 7th year. But this is something Nintendo themselves seem to agree with, because when we look at their forecast for the upcoming 12 months, we can see that they are forecasting to sell 15 million units of the Switch, though that would be down 16.5%. And they are forecasting to sell 180 million units of software, but that again would be down 15.9% from last year. And even these numbers seem to be a challenge because Nintendo president himself, Shuntaro Furukawa, had this to say about the next 12 months. He said, "Sustaining the Switch's sales momentum will be difficult in its 7th year. Our goal of selling 15 million units this fiscal year is a bit of a stretch, but we will do our best to bolster demand going into the holiday season so that we can achieve the goal. So there you go, some interesting news from Nintendo's latest financial briefing, but what information can we gauge from it? Well, firstly, let's just say that the Switch, of course, has been a monumental success, selling 125 million units so far. It's crazy. But equally obvious and clear to say is that the numbers are starting to decline quite rapidly. You know, a 22% decline year on year for the Switch hardware is steep. It's almost a quarter, for God's sake. So you would be, forgiven for thinking Nintendo would be ready to announce the rumored Switch Pro, Switch 2 console. But the fact that it hasn't, and it's gone to the contrary and actually declared that in fact there would be no such hardware release this fiscal year, leaves me thinking that they are basically relying and doubling down on software. The problem with that is, where the hell's the software? Because we've got Tears of the Kingdom out in 2 days. Amazing. That's going to push consoles for sure. And in July, we've got Pikmin 4. But after that, nothing. Crickets. So what is happening here? That leads me to think, or you would think, that the rumored Nintendo Direct in June is a certainty, right? Well, interestingly enough, journalist Andy Robinson took to Twitter only recently to talk about this, and when mentioning the upcoming Sony or predicted Sony announcement, he had this to say: I also heard a Sony showcase is happening in the usual late May, early June window, with Konami stuff included. I am not expecting Nintendo to do anything. And then, insider Jeff Grubb aligned himself with this and said, I'm with Andy. I expect a series of smaller tweets and YouTube drops, if anything. But unlike last year, that's just speculation. So that's really interesting because I don't know, where they got the information from or what information they have. But if that's the case, if we don't have a Nintendo Direct this June, then the next time we hear from Nintendo will be in August at Gamescom. And I don't imagine Nintendo going to go to Gamescom and just unleash a bunch of games to cover the holiday season. So that has to be really curious. Are Nintendo just going to coast and hope that Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4 sees them through the end of the year? Because Pikmin 4 is not going to sell consoles. So are they putting all of their hopes into Tears of the Kingdom? Or is Jeff Grubb right and we're going to get some smaller announcements from now until the holiday season? And what is the holiday season big game? Do we even have one? This is very curious. And one thing to say about the supposed rumored Switch Pro and Switch 2, just because we don't get a rumored console this fiscal year doesn't mean we don't get one announced. I know a lot of people did predict that we wouldn't get a new console this year, but it would be announced. So that still could be the case. I am a bit worried. Because where is the new Mario game? Where's the new Mario Kart game? Where's the rumored Donkey Kong Country game? Where's Metroid Prime 4? Are some of these going to come in as the holiday game, November, December, or are they just all going to get delayed for whatever the new Nintendo system will be next fiscal year? I don't know, man. There's a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. So we're going to have to wait and see. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Do you think we're going to get a new system announced this year? Do you think we'll have another big holiday game revealed, be it Donkey Kong or Metroid Prime 4? Let me know in the comments. I'm just not so sure anymore. I think Nintendo probably will just coast on Zelda and Pikmin, and we'll just have to see, early next year what happens. But we've come to our last story, and it's a good one because Nintendo has released an interview with members of the Tears of the Kingdom development team who have sat down to discuss their experience at bringing the game to the Switch. And it's really, really exciting. There's a lot of cool information gathered here in this interview. There's 3 parts. The first 2 parts have been released, and the third part, I believe, is being released tomorrow, the day before Tears of the Kingdom releases. And sitting down for the interview, we had, of course, longtime producer Eiji Aonuma, director Hidema Fujibayashi, technical director Takuhiro Dota, art director Satoru Takizawa, and sound director Hajime Wakai. And the first question posed to them was, the Legend of Zelda series seems to be one of those franchises where the visual style and game mechanics often change drastically for each entry. Was there ever a discussion about creating a new game with a completely new world rather than a sequel? And Aonuma for this basically answered by saying, no, not really. Although the previous title, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, has its own conclusion, we started to come up with new ideas that we wanted to bring to life in this already realized version of Hyrule. So our direction in making a sequel did not change. And Fujibayashi continued by saying, just like somewhere you know inside and out, we understand where everything is in Hyrule from the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And because of that, we believed it was possible to create new gameplay. For this reason, in the initial proposal, we clearly stated the setting will not change. As an important concept, even when I shared this with the team members here, there was no objections and we all aligned on that idea from that point onwards. The interviewer continued, so I see the decision to create a sequel in the same setting was deliberate, and Dota answered yes. In contrast, we made some fairly big changes to the gameplay. In The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, if players wanted to travel from the sky to the ground, they had to select it from the map, but in this game you can dive from the sky directly to the ground without any interruption. On top of that, players can also ride on flying vehicles and so on, offering even more freedom within the same setting as the previous game. If a location were completely unfamiliar to you, you'd probably be hesitant to dive from the sky. But because it's a world that you've already explored in the previous game, these transportation methods make sense. The interviewer continued, being able to dive from the sky to the surface and into a pond seamlessly in this title sure does feel exhilarating. It truly feels like an open air game this time around. And Dota said, adding the ability to dive from the sky was also partly due to Onuma-san and Fujibayashi-san's persistence, right? Laughs. Fujibayashi says, yeah, I wanted to make this happen ever since The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, thinking how satisfying it would be to dive from the sky and jump directly into the water. In this title, diving is not just about enjoying an exhilarating seamless means of travel, but it also brings more value as a tool for gathering information above the surface by surveying it from above. Since this is a sequel, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the foundation, but I see there are also various considerations for new players as well. By the way, if you're using the same world, don't you need to put effort into creating differences in the graphics and sound? And to that, Kaziwawa replies, I keenly felt that implementing something new into the same world was actually harder than creating something from scratch. Although it is the same world, we want to make sure players experience it with a new sense of wonder. So to achieve that, we had to take a world originally made up of things we've designed to fit in it perfectly, and then bolt a new layer of surprises on top of it, designed from a different perspective. And we had to do so without erasing the familiar world. Even though we racked our brains last time to pull it all together, of course, from the development staff's point of view, it's definitely more fun to come up with ideas for creating new surprises, but it sure was a challenging development process. Wakai continues, for the game's music, we broke the conventions of the series in the previous game and mainly used piano tones. While this title follows the similar musical direction, we grappled with how to create a sense of freshness as a sequel. The sound effects are generated by a completely new system that's different from the previous game. So even if the same sound is used, it sounds a lot more realistic in this game. For example, in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, we tried to make nearby environmental sounds, such as bird calls, sound realistic. However, with this title, the expressiveness of these sounds has improved to the point where players hear a bird call from afar and sense the distance more realistically. The interviewer continues. Now, let's move on to things that have changed from the previous game. Speaking of which, I immediately noticed that Link looks a little different in this title, doesn't he? Onuma goes on, yes, his right arm. We wanted an iconic feature that would make it obvious at first glance that it's the Link from this game. Speaking of Link's arm, hands is a major theme in the title. Hands, can you elaborate on this? Fujibayashi. Titles in the Legend of Zelda series intertwine all the elements of gameplay, mechanics, and story and combine them all into a single game. For this title, we chose hands as the key theme to bring them all together. For example, abilities that Link uses to solve puzzles are all released from his hand and arm. We even included this symbolically in the game's mechanics, such as having scenes that use hands when opening special doors. This hands theme also crops up here and there as a key element as the story develops. Dota continues, the previous game was a relatively lonesome game, or rather an endurance game where you made full use of Link's body and strength alone to traverse the vast world. What's unique this time is joining hands and incorporating with various characters, and at times creating items with Link's own hands and utilizing them as you progress. Takezawa continues, we were intentional about making his hands theme show through in the visuals as well as in the story direction. If you watch the trailers that we've released so far, I think you may be able to get a sense of this atmosphere. Wakai continues, we also expressed the hands theme by implementing hand claps and such in the game's music. Onuma, well, simply put, hands expresses the idea of connecting. This implies to the story too, which connects to Hyrule's past. It also talks about a major struggle called the Imprisoning War, which until now was considered a myth even in Hyrule. Fujibayashi continues, and the protagonist's name is Link after all, and they all laugh. So, interesting stuff. The little tidbits I thought, I'd bring to you. It's just to bring the hype even further. But you can see from the main thing I get from that interview is that the biggest challenge, as you can imagine, was how to get, make a map, make a world that we seemingly all know really well and make it seem fresh. I'm super excited now, hearing this, reading this, with 2 days left to go until the game comes out. I'm ready to play it now. I'm ready to play it. So you can read the rest of the interview. It is on Nintendo's website. I'm going to link it below. There is another part, chapter 3 will be released tomorrow, so I'm going to link that as well. And then, have fun reading it. So yes, that is the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I will be back tomorrow with whatever Nintendo throws at us. And don't forget, just 2 days left until Tears of the Kingdom. I will be, of course, streaming the Treehouse event live here, so tune in for that. And until then, my good friends, have an awesome night and bye.